which degree has been overtaken by modern research, I am fascinated by the question of why the expedition has attained such an iconic place in the annals of ocean exploration and science. Why have so many later vessels of discovery, such as the lunar module, piloted by Harrison Schmitt on the Apollo 17 mission, and a space shuttle, been named after H.M.S. Challenger? And what was it that compelled those 6 Challenger scientists to leave their offices, their laboratories, and the comforts of home to embark on such a long and at times difficult sea voyage? The Challenger expedition was first and foremost about science, but it was funded by the British government through the Navy, which turned over one of its vessels to this small group of scientists to sail around the world for several years, making measurements and collecting samples of everything from seafloor mud to plants and animals from the islands they visited. Furthermore, the Navy provided funds for their salaries, as well as for the microscopes, sample jars, dredges, and other pieces of scientific equipment they would need on the voyage. Why? Part of the reason, I believe, had to do with the expedition's timing, as will be explored in this book. The Victorian era was characterized by curiosity about the natural world, among scientists, certainly, but also among the general public. Amateur naturalists abounded: birdwatchers, fossil hunters, butterfly collectors. Some of these nature enthusiasts donated their personal collections to newly established museums of natural history, or even set up their own museums. An expedition to explore the ocean was bound to make discoveries and bring back an abundance of new marine creatures for display. It was almost guaranteed to be a popular venture. That perception was borne out quickly. As the voyage progressed, dispatches from Challenger appeared in newspapers and periodicals worldwide and were eagerly awaited, especially in Britain. When Challenger finally returned home from her epic journey and moored at the Navy docks near the mouth of the Thames, so many people wanted to visit the now famous ship that special trains had to be laid on to take passengers from London to the dockyards. Beyond the intrinsic interest in exploration and discovery, compelling practical considerations came into play when the expedition was first proposed. Britain depended on sea power to guard its global trading routes and protect the far-flung colonies of the British Empire, which were the source of much of the country's wealth. New information about the vast tracts of ocean patrolled by the Royal Navy would be inherently valuable. In addition, much of the burgeoning business of laying deep-sea telegraph cables was centered in Britain, and the Challenger's characterization of the largely unknown deep-sea floor would be a boon to that industry. Britain was powerful, supremely confident, and the richest country in the world. The government could afford to mount such an expedition. Not only would it enhance Britain's reputation as a seagoing nation and supporter of scientific inquiry, it would also have strategic value. The Challenger expedition was not the first voyage of ocean exploration with a scientific component. British naval voyages, and those of other countries too, often included a naturalist. And for decades, serving officers in the British Navy have been tasked with taking measurements of the Earth's magnetic field, recording meteorological data, observing the flora, fauna, and geology of remote lands, and surveying coastlines. Some of these officers had been recognized for their scientific work and became prominent members of the Royal Society, an influential body of scientists and intellectuals. Before the Challenger expedition, however, most of the Navy's peacetime voyages of exploration had been geographically limited and focused on practical or commercial matters, such as surveys of shipping routes, acquisition of new territories, or the search for a northwest passage to the Orient. The scientific observations also concentrated on the practical: magnetism for navigation, flora and fauna as potential food sources, geology for potential mining ventures. But, crucially, this meant that the Navy and its officers were well prepared for an expedition like that of Challenger, concerned solely with science. I have highlighted here only Britain, but a few other countries had similar legacies of scientific expertise in their navies, and by the 1870s, there were indications that the United States and Germany in particular were making more ambitious plans for ocean exploration. This, too, was potent motivation for the British government to take on a project like the Challenger expedition. The country could not risk